Hi guys, welcome back. Today we are going to be making an oil burner. So, very basic. We've got the hot pan here, if you like, and this is all bought from a cheapo store. So this is a stainless steel cooking utensil, and you get a pack of 2 mixing bowls. That's going to sit in there. That's going to go to the base of our gas bottle that we're going to use. It's a 13 kg gas bottle, and on the side of it we need some iron pipes, some iron fittings. We need some hinges, so we've got a bit of welding to do in this project, or you could nut and bolt these if you so please. This is a copy of Jerry's DIY, the Irish fella. So it's a bit of a copy. At the same time, it's a bit of a few changes to the bits and bobs that I can get hold of. So we've got everything's 3/4 for now. We're going to use some reducers down to 3/4 down to either 22mm copper or 15mm copper. I'm not 100% sure yet. See how everything works together. So these are 50mm steel butt hinges. I couldn't get plain ones. You can't seem to get plain steel hinges anymore. So everything's galvanised, so a bit of grinding to do on that. Wearing some respirator. And I've got a gas bottle down there. It's just a 13 kg standard gas bottle. So we've got some drilling, some cutting, some angle grinding, and get some oil and set fire to things. Great. And it's now over to voice over me. So on here we're just using this. I'm not sure the proper name for it. It's I think it's more used in building and like a larger roofing square. We're just going to be measuring around 7 inches for the burner to sit in here, and then leave an inch below that, and then for your gate door, if you like. So we're just going to use a small little clamp to clamp on a marker, move around this. Ideally you should use this on a flat table, and it didn't go all that grand for me on this one, but it did the job. It was okay, but it just gives you a rough line of where you need to go and where you need to set. I wouldn't obsess about getting this absolutely spot on. It's unnecessary really. We're going to be putting on some 1 inch by millimeter, or 25mm by 1mm, I should correctly say, to block out and seal out the cut line on the top, and then just pack it with some fire rope just to give it a little bit of a seal, but that's probably going to be in part 2. I've seen some videos, and you can make these for I think it's the 30 kg bottles. The tall ones are about, I think they stand about 4 foot tall. I'm not sure, I've never really used one. I was going to make a barbecue out of one a while ago, but I ended up using one of these 13 kg ones, which works absolutely fine. Just got to make sure that door at the top, the upper door if you like, or the fire mouth door, you can get your burner in and out nice and easy, just for maintenance wise. And they do soot up quite a bit, so I think you will be taking out that burner at least, well, if I'm running mine, probably 8 hours whilst I'm working. You're going to be doing it before you light it in the morning. So just something to keep in mind. And if you are feeling a little bit chilly, you can always whip out the angle grinder and point it at your nuts. I'm just using a bit of insulation to lean on. The floor in my workshop is pretty cold, and it's actually pretty good to weld on. I use that very lightly, but I have done it previously, and it protects whatever you're working on the ground beneath you. So I'm using a really small 1mm grinding disc, and I use a pretty good quality one for this. And what I will say is, prior to this, with your gas bottles, fill them up full of water and then empty them. This one was dated 1986, and it's been outside of where I got it from roughly since then, I believe, or I was told, and it's never been used. So just something to bear in mind. With cutting out the doors, you leave a little bit of a burr, so I'm just using a no-gerb deburring tool. It's just a little bit of tool steel or carbide, and you just run it down the sides, and it'll take off that nasty edge. You can just use a flap disc on your angle grinder, but this is it kind of keeps it clean, and I don't want to take away any more material than I need to with the angle grinder, and you can always go a little bit too far, I find. So just using the Noga, take a little bit of time there, and nice and easy. One bit of advice I would use is the weld line or the weld seam that goes through the centre of the tank. I would try and either be above that or below it and not cut around it. I've seen a few people struggle with that, and I think I did that with my barbecue, I'm not sure, but just to keep that in mind there, go either below it or above it, whatever's easier. From this point, we're just going to look at the cut components that we've cut out and just work out how's everything going to sit, where's the hinges going to go, and I'm just going to use a bit of threaded bar just to hold the burner in place. You could do it a bit better, but this is just what I had, and again, it's just going to be an easy build, and I'm going to weld these in a bit later on. Again, we're not building spaceships here, so it doesn't have to be that accurate. As long as the bowl sits in there correctly and isn't going to tip over, then it's not going to be a problem there. So just going to get the threaded bar. You can use flat bar or angle iron if you wanted it. Just cut it to length, measure it, and we're going to fold it round because it's a round bowl. It'd be better if you could get some sort of square object, I think, but I'm cheap, so I just bought cheap. So I'm just going to use these, bend these across, and make sure they're a similar sort of size, fit them in, and nice and easy. Try not to rip your workbench off while you're doing this, and you could probably just use a ring spanner to bend those across, but nice and easy. Fit up here, yeah, it looks okay, does the job. Well, later on we're going to put a little bit of a brace across because the bowl will kind of tip as it gets hot and cold. So I did it with a little bit of copper, so you'll see that later on in the video. I'm just going to be using a half round flour here just to round over the corners so it marries up a little bit better with the curvature of the gas bottle. Nice and easy. Again, you can use an angle grinder, but it's nice to use the hand tools now and again. Plus, it's you have to get your dust mask out, you have to put your hearing protection on, you have to get the glasses out. Or you just use a file and it takes you 30 seconds. These are pressure vessels, so with the ring in the middle, or the seam line, is that they're under stress and strain probably for strength reasoning. So when you cut that out, that material wants to bow inwards because that line is the material shrunk basically. So in order to get the door to marry up as best as we can, we're just going to open it up, and we're just going to use the vise across to then open those up. So. I mentioned earlier on that you could either weld these or nut and bolt these together. I actually welded some hinges onto this before this footage, and it looked horrific. The shed that I'm in at the moment, my little tiny 130 or 142 amp Parwell inverter stick welder, it trips out the breaker. It's only a single phase, it's nothing fancy. So what I'm using here is I'm going to mark everything out and use these skin pins. So I'm going to drill out the holes, put on the hinges, and then it will give me a little bit of clearance and adjustment if I need it. These skin pins are typically used in aerospace or automotive, I believe. And we used to use them for aligning skins onto aircraft wing ribs. Always struggle to say that. And they're just used, I think you start off with a 3/32 and then you move up to slightly larger. Can't remember the exact size. You can see here I'm just drawing around the hinge, and I'm going to use an automatic centre punch. I'm just using a Starrett, and drill through those, and then you can use the use a welding magnets. Mine are terrible. But you can use those to line them up and then put on the markings, centre punch them, drill them out, and then use the skin pins for fine adjustment. This is quite an old gas bottle, so I'm led to believe. So the wall thickness is pretty thick. I don't know if a fairly newer gas bottle is going to be any different. So I'm going to drill and tap the hinges onto here and the catchers. So I'm using a 4.2mm drill bit for a standard M5 tap. As you can see here, the skin pins just make it that little bit easier, just an extra helping hand if you like. So I'm just using this small little tap handle and putting those through, cleaning the tap as you go along. And if it feels a bit tight, don't force it because you'll snap it, and a bit of a nightmare when that happens. I'm using stainless steel cap head screws. You don't need to do that, but it's just what I had. The other M5 hex head bolts that I had were really long, so it was just unnecessary, so I just had these surplus to requirements. Next off, we're going to use a hole saw to put the flue. I just went to a local fabricator and picked this out the scrap bin and gave him some beer money. It's a little bit big, this hole saw that I do have. It is a little bit big, but I'm gonna go to my mate's shed a little bit later on and use his power. So I'm not going to be tripping my breaker, so I can weld everything up. I'm using a Makita 458. It's very torquey brushless hand drill, so you've got to be a little bit careful with that, but it does work fine. Again, you know, I don't want to spend too much time on this and making it pretty and making it look like a minion that everybody else is doing at the minute. So I'm just going to pound on through this. So I got an angle from the same fabrication place. I was lucky with that one. If not, just make a 45 and make sure you've got enough draw on the flue itself. I'm just going to be welding this up. I had a bit of a gap to bridge, but it worked out fine. The welds aren't pretty, but you know, it'll do a job. Alongside this, I wanted to keep the handle at the top so I can put a flat plate in, probably in part 2. So, you know, I can get a brew going when I'm in the workshop. So just to put a kettle on top of there and, you know, works fine. It works fine. So, thanks to Laird for letting me use his shed. Spot on. No issues there. And the little Power Weld 142 is... it's great for a little welder. It's absolutely spot on. So now we're just going to use a 32mm hole saw to get in the actual the drip feeder in the side there. Not the best camera angle, so apologies for that one. With the feeder, we just want to put a bracket on the top, and we can nut and bolt or just bolt straight through this little bracket, which is going to be a little bit of a support and brace on the side, just to keep everything nice and tight and square. The oil feeder likes to be kept as vertical as possible, so when you're using the valve, you don't have any issues there. Just going to line everything up now, fit that bracket to size, and I'm just going to use a Jubilee clip or a hose clamp, depending on where you are in the world. A hose clamp onto here, you know, heat resistant. They're easy to take in and off, so you'll see in a moment. I'm just going to slide that on the top there, and it's just going to keep that as vertical as possible. Here in lovely England at the moment, we're seeing temperatures around sort of 4 degrees Celsius, so it is a little bit chilly at the moment, and this is more for keeping the tools warm. As I mentioned, this is only a temporary workshop that I've got. My next one is going to be a floating workshop, and it will be, well, it's going to be on a boat, of course, and that will be, I'm guessing in probably about a year to 18 months' time is when I'm going to get that done. So back to it, we are going to be bolting on the small little hasps. In looking back, hindsight is a wonderful thing. I probably would have gone for some bigger ones, but these are the ones that I had available to me, and they do a job, you know, absolutely fine. The next project in part 2 is going to be forging some really nice handles on our newly built forge that we've done. And here we're just putting in the small little the feeder nozzle on the inside. So this is just 15mm copper pipe, and I'm going to do a parts list at the end of the video just for everything that you need for this job. just to make it that nice and easy for you. This next part is taking off the front of the valve, and we're using a triangular file on here, and all we want to do is put in a very small V groove in order for the oil to drip a little bit more uniformly. And if you offset your file to be able to put in the lowest point of the valve, so as the oil drips down into the chamber, if you like, it's going to travel in a more central position. I hope that makes sense. But you'll see in a moment what I do, and it just makes that oil flow a little bit easier. And we're almost there, guys. So I've lit everything up. I just used a blowtorch and a firelighter to get everything going, and I just put a little bit of oil in the top. Later on we're going to be using a bucket to get everything started, but as you can see, like an idiot, it's very hot. So it does burn really, really well, and the actual copper pipe that I've got on there is a little bit too long, so we're going to shorten that a little bit later on in the video. But as far as test goes, yeah, it works great. It works really, really well. So I was surprised. I've never seen one in person. I've been to car garages where they've had the big industrial ones, but I've never seen a bloke make one in person out of an old gas bottle and some copper fittings. So this is on quite high, and later on in the video you'll see it being more of a drip oiler. I want all the paint to start burning off this so I can put on some paint later on down the line. And it's now the next day. I've had a tidy up. I've bought myself a nice new bucket that I've drilled a hole in the side of, and this is going to be for the oil infill. So I'm just using a 15mm to tank fitting, and you can buy this from your local hardware store, to connect up some 15mm copper pipe ready for the intake on top of the feeder. And you can see we're now filled up. We're going to prime it and we're going to set fire to it. So I've got the oil on just as a small little drip, and this is what you want to be running and aiming for, really. To start this up, we're going to use just a small little fire lighter and put it in the bottom there, and it goes out. Take it back out again, light it properly and get that oil burning. I did cheat to get this started because I wanted to see how it all worked, and I was a bit excited, so I just used a blowtorch after this to get it really, really going. So kick that in there. It's not going to be an instant lighting heat. The flash point of oil is a lot higher than something like a diesel burner. Definitely do not use petrol to get this going. Unnecessary. Just buy these little these fire lighters, or use a blowtorch if you're a bit impatient and it's an extra cold day. So it's gonna start working well, hopefully. Again, ideally the paint needs to come off before you do this, but I can leave this and let the paint sort of melt off on its own accord. And yeah, here we are, proof of the test. It's working well. It's working well. Burns nice and clean. There's no smoke coming out of the outside the back of the building, and it works as I wanted it to, really. And we're using just a 15mm emergency stop if it's just an extra shut off if and when we need it. I have got a little bit of an oil leak that I need to fix, and it's just below the closing valve at the top there. But all in all, it works really well. Quite pleased with it. As you can see here, the paint is starting to fall off it now, and it just sort of scrapes off into a little wire brush, takes it off. So next video, as I say, we're going to probably do some forging of the handles. We're going to see, and if we need to, is put in a 1-inch strip around the doors and put some fire rope in there. Drawing wise, it doesn't need to draw much more really. When it gets going, it's fine. It might help to help it burn a little bit more efficiently, but it's doing the job fine. And we also want to be putting on the plate on the top so we can put on a brew. And that's going to be a wrap for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you liked the video. Please hit that like. Give me a comment. If you want to know anything, please feel free to give me a message. Again, sign up to my Instagram. It's anchordesigns_GB for my Instagram, and you'll be able to see behind the scenes and upcoming videos, etc, etc. Be great to see you on there, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks, guys.